What's up guys, how's it going? I'm Bind and today I got the stylus ready, which means we're doing digital painting, and I'm going to take you through one of the most fun and fast approaches to digital painting that I developed throughout the years. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first things first, we need an idea and we need a basic approach and a color palette and all of that stuff to be able to start out fast and efficient. Because one of the things that people don't realize is that being efficient and fast and also having fun, it starts in your head. Without an idea, you're just messing around on the canvas, you're not going anywhere. It's frustrating and it's not fun. So first of all, let's get an idea and bring up some ref. All right, so about the ref. If you know me, you know I want to do something original. I don't want to let the ref dictate me what to do. But it's also useful to look at ref, of course, because without it, sometimes we can't make up our minds what we want. So what I do is I either online or in my folder on the hard drive, I look through some images, and the criteria I'm looking for is simply something like that. That is a tip. I think it sounds extremely simple, but it's very useful to not think, oh, I need this detail, I need the exact, no. You just need something like that in terms of shape, in terms of color. That's what you're looking for. So either it's something like this, or there's some very distant view, some fog in the foreground, a lot of blues. Also could be something like this, which is pretty different, right? A crazy sky. So what I'm trying to do is to picture what I want in this scene. So for example, put some dudes, put a spaceship, put some artificial structures, whatever you want, whatever is your overarching goal, can you see it in the scene? For me, that's not it. And it helps to have very different images so that you're not like, I'm doing only the mountains now. No, be open-minded about what you want, and you can do this exact structure here with this guy, no problemo. You just mix then the two, right? But that's only a question of color palette. So what I'm looking at is what gives me a nice color palette and what gives me some nice shape composition, and that's about it. So, and could easily be something like this where you you want to do a giant spaceship, here you go, there's plenty of room, and then there's some color composition to accompany it, right? So once you have this down, we go to Photoshop. See you in a bit. So we are in Photoshop, and as you can see, I created a new canvas which has quite some pixel real estate to it. So we're operating on like 7000 by 420, which is I think a 4:3 aspect ratio roughly. I want the wide shot. So this is what we're going for now, because in the process I might cut away from it, or even add to it. So that's always something that you should have in the back of your mind. We're not dictating the content with the frame, it's the other way around. Once the content comes, then the content will dictate what kind of a frame it needs, okay? So first of all, we'll zoom out here pretty much all the way. Why is that? That's because I want you, or I want us, to start this pretty much as a thumbnail. Now, it's a crazy resolution for a thumbnail, I hear you say, but think of it like this. we're working with the thumbnail directly, so it doesn't hurt to have that crazy resolution. And later I just make it bigger and I got all the pixels, everything is sharp, and I just can continue working on it. So that's what we're trying to do, right? So what you can do now is you can either do a sketch, and for the sketch you might want it to be a little bit bigger, or we do it just a value sketch, which I will show you, maybe both. So let's pretend we're doing a sketch. I need a horizon, and then I need shapes. So what I want to do is I want to do a beach scene with a very pale, cloudy light. It should be diffuse, it should be misty, it should be eerie feeling. And then in the foreground there's like the coast, and there's people, space marines, soldiers coming from the coast, and basically extracting via a giant spaceship that is waiting for them. So this is the plan. Very ambitious, I know. You should have ambitious plans. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. And speaking of ambition, what you should also, you can have ambitious goals, but what you need to do first is to keep it simple still, right? So don't now, we're not zooming in and doing the crazy detail. We're doing it very simple. So I want something of a coastline, and I want some vegetation on the coast, and I want there to be giant rocks, at least 2. And then I want there to be people. The people I'm putting now on an extra layer because that way I can later just move them around if I want to. So people moving towards a certain point here on the horizon, that means they of course are getting smaller as they move out there. So and then we have a big structure, which you can also put that extra so that you can move it around. And I want it to be a spaceship. Let's bring a little bit of a different brush here. That is, don't be afraid to use bigger brushes. So what I'm doing now is I'm assuming the shape of the exhaust, like of the back of the ship, where are the boosters, and where you will maybe then see. So actually the boosters are going to be important, right? So we're going to want them at least 2 each side. You can also mirror this if you want to be accurate, but this is sloppy as hell, I know, but bear with me, it will make sense later. Okay, so already I think I want to tilt this over later a little bit so that it vanishes a little bit towards here, so it gets a nice offset angle, right? Because if everything is vanishing here in the middle, it's pretty boring, right? It's not very natural shot, it's not very movie-like, it's just feels constructed and fake. So we're not doing that. But first, we'll see what we can do in terms of a little bit of a shape with this. So maybe this is opening up in some way. And then what we can do, also maybe this is going like so. don't be afraid to have it look like this, right? Because if we're doing detail now, we're not fast anymore, and it's not necessary because we're painting later, right? This is a traditional painter's approach, and if you have seen traditional painters, they do very sloppy sketches, very sloppy, because they just want to get an idea first. This is not to show off your sketching skills, and believe me, this is not like completely like I don't want to show you guys like a sketch that sucks, but that is just what you have to do to be efficient. So a lot of this stuff we can erase from it too. A lot of this stuff makes more sense the more you do it, right? This is, I feel, is already too complicated of a shape. I don't like this the other way around, actually. So let's see, maybe there's something like this. So anyways, this don't lose yourself in here. So immediately what I'm doing is I'm now transforming this to see if it works when I'm putting an angle to it. This gets a little bit bigger in the process, so everything goes right now. It's not final, and we're just setting up a little bit of an angle. So be careful not to make it too extreme. And now it can vanish somewhere here. And this is not very important. It is just important to get a basic idea of the shape, right? Because now you can see we're getting a feeling of if this thing is, how long is this? Already feels massive, and we're just cutting it wherever we want, and we can also alter the shape. Right, so this can be a little bit like this, or we can add to the shape, put new stuff on top of the structure that was not there before. So all of that stuff, it could happen now. So that just means we have a basic perspective that is correct, that is not completely impossible, right? So that's one thing. And then maybe what happens is, and now you have to be careful, because if we move this around too much, it's no longer accurate in terms of perspective. A little bit can do, but if you do this too much, there is a problem. So now I want to see what if these people are heading there. This could be very well the case. Have a giant ramp, and then maybe some type of a cutout where you can possibly enter. So this is, but we're not going too far with this as of right now. I'm now switching a little bit to other stuff. If this is a rock, I'm now obscuring the boosters a little bit, which could be good, could also not be good. So maybe we'll do this a little bit, and to vignette also the frame with the rocks, because over here we're leading into the image, blocking off this side and also kind of blocking off this, so everybody has to go through here. So and just as you can see, as we develop this, we can get a better and better idea about that actually. So now I want more vegetation in the foreground, which could look like this. There could be rocks, and then there needs to be sand and some kind of a, how do you call that, beach. And then we can put more rocks if we want to, and just with the rocks make something that is logical to do a composition that guides the way further into the scene. And then what I also sketch is clouds, because I want some lighting from the top that is rather dramatic. So I want to break the sky open, and here it will be blue, or bluish gray, and here it will be gray. And in the foreground there will be it will be dark. Those rocks will be dark, and then there will be the vegetation in some patches maybe, and then yeah, have a nice diagonal composition. So as you can see, still a mess. I'm still making up my mind about this. Once you have this game plan, and again, you could have skipped all of this and just did the value sketch first. So we're merging this. Take this into consideration. And now I'm starting to do the values. So I want this to be still very small. This is the biggest I would want this to be to do a thumbnail. So watch now what happens. Ship is a little bit big, but we'll deal with this in a second. So we need a foreground. There needs to be some vegetation on these rocks, I guess. That would be good. And the rocks need to go into the sand and need to be anchored in the ground. Maybe there is some kind of a vegetation here that is a little bit more, a little bit darker, a little bit more contrasty. So and the value study now, well, I shouldn't say study, it's a sketch, right? It's our own thing. We're not imitating anything. The values now will be really important. So this the foreground, and whenever I need a new layer, I will now make dramatic impacts here. So this will be its own layer, and then I need the ground to be its own layer, and the ground will vanish more or less the new horizon down here. So this is a little bit tricky, because this will be, I think this will be brighter in the back and then become darker in the foreground, because in the foreground we will have the beach, the sand. That needs to be darker, a lot darker. Something like this, right? So now we have this separate, and then yeah, even behind this, I will treat this like a very traditional painting. So that means I will not have too many layers eventually. I want to be simple. The only reason why I'm now having this a little bit separate and layered is because then I can tune the values much better, and I'll be much faster with that. So of course, the further you go back, the less contrast you have. So then those next few rocks, we push them out, go back. This is our sky, and in the sky I want something like this to just crack open, be bright, be really, actually the whole sky needs to be really bright. So that means something like this, and then I guess what you can also do is you can select the inverse and then just play around with some tones. So this, we said it was too dark, and now we'll see it needs to be brighter on one side. And now it melts with the horizon, which is not so bad because we want it to be very misty, a little bit right, cloudy, stuff like this. So what we can do now, or let's do it in a second, is to basically switch to a brush that has more than just a hard round, a little bit of a pressure sensitivity, so that we can render stuff a little bit better. But in general, I want these clouds to go somewhat like this. What is missing? Some of the most important stuff, of course, is missing, and that is the ship. The ship, we'll place it, I think, eventually what we'll keep separate is the structure, the ship, the people, and then just foreground and background, and that's it. So we're not going to have a insane layer structure that will slow us down. Ship is coming. Why are you doing it so sloppily? You might think to yourself. The reason is I am now rethinking the shape already. So I'm making it, I don't just recite the shape. I try to do it more interesting. I try to do it like a immediate iteration on the shape. And you will see that this reads very differently once it's grayscale. And now subconsciously we're taking into consideration, of course, also the shape of the rocks that help us with that composition, right? So if you want a perfect line, just do this and you're fine. But again, there could be variations to this. And then that ship needs to be bright because it's in the distance. You can see that there's quite a ways away from the protagonists. So this needs to be bright, this needs to blend in with this. I just make it a little bit darker than this. And then what I'm doing is already do a second pass on this. And that second pass will be the dark side of the ship, which is the side that is facing us, just like the rocks. So basically it's time to slowly get rid of the sketch, and immediately you see that something very interesting is happening. Immediately this looks very painterly if I get rid of the sketch. So the only thing I still need are, of course, the people, and the people need to be in front, because potentially those people will overlap everything. And now you really want to zoom in. I know you do, because those people are so small, but don't just yet. So I want them to carry something of a device or a weapon, maybe. And I'm just looking for, this is just the shape. And maybe they are walking and maybe they are running. So if they'd be running, we need to do that a little bit differently, of course. And you have to now approach this a lot like a painter. This is not about, this is just being vague, and it will not matter because the basic sizes, as you can see, we have it correct. Already there is context to the entire scene, so there is not really a reason to be afraid of anything by this point. Sometimes it helps to make it a little bit more dramatic. So let's see. Yeah, sometimes this turns out fine, sometimes not so fine. I'll do the figures dark because they have potential contrast. Maybe not quite as dark as the rocks for now, but you can see. So anything else, we have them separate. Let's get rid of the sketch and we'll see what happens here. So now what I do is we'll switch a little bit more to painting, and if I need, I will make stuff darker to be more readable. So already maybe it's not a good idea to put the head of this guy in that shape. Also, I think we need one bigger guy. I think the position is all right, but maybe those rocks need to move out of the frame for a second. So could do this. Also have these rocks be more dramatic. A little bit more of them, maybe. And then we can go even lighter. Moving back there to maybe do smaller and smaller iterations of those rocks. And now you can see that there's this claim will be put to the test, because if this is as far away as the ship, then obviously contrast needs to be kind of the same, right? So we'll fix this I think, in a second. I now want to see how many rocks there should be. And of course now we can switch to different means of painting. We just can paint a lot lighter and bring that value up. So they will be silhouetted, I think, just like so. And then the same goes for these foreground versions of the rock. They will have something like a light side to them. I think this sky means that light is coming from here much more. So we're treating the rocks in that same way, lighting them from the left, top left. It's something like a rim lighting from the left. So this cannot have too high contrast. Will not be believable if it does. Well, you can see what's happening is not too bad. Now back to the people. I kind of think this is this will work. And sometimes you get accidental shapes which are really interesting. So now the pose of this guy is really coming to be in movement, and that's what I was looking for. I'm not trying to have them be static. I want them to move. So this guy, for example, is way too static. Even at this size, you can clearly see that this is too static. Yeah, starting to get too many layers, so I'm merging layers. So now I can, this is pretty good because he's running for sure. So there is an urgency now in the scene, which I think is exactly what you want. Maybe this is too far off. Now if you have more people than just one or two, you can do composition, because this is not like a flock of birds basically, so you don't want them to evenly spread. And now, since we are in Photoshop, we can easily fix that and then just separate them a little bit, which I think immediately makes this better. And of course you can also scale them just a little bit, and you could even go to a slider if you want to and just make them brighter. See how they like melt into the scene much better. But we don't want to just utilize sliders too much here. That will be a little bit boring. So what else do we need? I said we need a second pass on that ship. I initially thought this ship would be too big. Right now I think maybe not. Maybe it's good. So Let's see. We're still doing the composing, and you might think, oh, wait a minute, this is supposed to be a fast approach. Why are we still on this? The reason is, first, I'm talking, and secondly is because this is the most important part of the image. This is the design of the image. Now we can go a little bit bigger. If you get this right, you got an image. If you don't get this right, you will struggle forever. That is the thing that people need to understand here. So, doing a little bit now of the brightest parts of the image. The brightest parts are going to be the boosters of the ship. And I want these to be big. And of course, since we got a little bit of a perspective going on, you could also say I need to distort them or something, because they are technically getting a little bit smaller here, right? Technically, yes. But we don't need to be so precise yet, because all of these shapes, and I want you to remember this, all of these shapes are very easy to correct. This is not, it's just a few tones, right? So, down the other part of the ship has to come, and the only thing that matters for that is where does the shape break over? And that is right here. Now I don't want to see this anymore. Now I'm doing a much more organic. See how I'm not doing straight lines anymore, because this initial sketch is a boring. It's boring to have it all straight lines. If it was a bigger ship, it will be the case that it will have substructures that are giving it a slight bend or that are sticking out somewhere, and you will not just have straight lines. A big object is simple in shape, but complicated in the outline nonetheless. If it was just simple, it would look like a miniature that you blow up, which is not what we want. So this could be good. And where I'm minding those lines is where I know it's crucial for perspective, right? So that's where I am trying to be really, really careful. So this is crucial to get something like this right. And then moving on, this, see, this, it's important that you get this somewhat right, and you can come back with little shapes to this big shape and make sure that you get this angle correct. And then you can go crazy once in a while. But for now, I think this is pretty much all in the shadow. I would think so, yeah. And here, where the light could hit something, I let a little bit of white or a little bit of the bright area of the ship. It's like painting again. You don't want to just make it perfect. You want to hint at details, and then later on we make the details work. This could be very interesting. Doing a structure here. Why are you bringing up my keyboard? All right, so now sometimes you get an idea from this, and I want to have a light on here, And we'll see what that means in a second. So hiding the selection, making this stuff darker just a little bit. Away with that. So yeah, you can see now slowly you can read stuff. Okay, I did something wrong actually. Did something very wrong. I forgot to lock the layer. Forgot to lock the layer. If you do that, yeah, it will not respect your shape. So it still did not look bad, but as you can see now, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I really wanted to see. It's a little hole in that layer. Other than that, now this is starting to make sense in a way that is very pleasing. Oh yeah, this is something that. All right. So we got a shape here that is actually all right, I think. And that means, excuse me, that means that we can, selection was still active, we can move on and do more with it. So, but not obsessing still. This is a scene. I have to get back to what matters, which is sky and the surrounding areas. And what I'm doing now is I'm getting rid of just the hard round. I need a little bit of the cloud to happen, and I'm utilizing now a softer brush. But I'm trying not to kill what is here and what is good. And now I'm mixing things a lot. It's very interesting. This is part of the, it looks like the horizon is here, but actually it's not here. It's much deeper than that. But it's also good if you cannot see. And then we just hint at it a little bit. And I think I want to blend these into each other a lot. So that's where the blue is supposed to happen later. And this is where all the darkness, the dark clouds are on the left. And on the right are, of course, because of the lighting angle from the top left, and the bright clouds will remain here. And again, no need to obsess over this. We just need to make it work a little bit. And once it does, we move on. So now, this thing, wait a minute. Something does not make sense in terms of the order. Yeah, that ship is kind of part of the background. And then this, of course, now, yeah. Push these rocks in the back and we merge them. Because at this point, yeah, I can change them, but I might as well just paint into the layer. We have the sky, we have the ground, and then we have rocks in the foreground. So that's okay. And now I need to tackle this ground a little bit. and just make sure that this is actually working a little bit better, because the idea was that this was these are sand dunes, and then it becomes brighter here, and then it becomes darker over here, basically. And then maybe it's slowly vanishing, and then the water gives, I think there will be some maybe sand banks or something like this, and these we would have to express them maybe like so, but you'll see what I mean in a minute. Not too much though. This is now, first of all, this cannot be too bright. And this, I have to hide the selection, else I will not see what's going on. And then darker still over here. I think that is now the darkest this can get. Undoing the selection here. And then we have to silhouette this in a way that is pleasing. I think, yeah, this needs to be darker, and if you want to have more extreme shapes, you might as well just do selections for the shape. And then, yeah, we slowly will see if it makes sense. So the entire ground is one now, so that gives us a lot of freedom, because now we can just basically do whatever we want. And you will not be able to see later on what is actually part of the ground and what is part of the water and what is part of the reflection, because it's going to be a tone in tone thing, and that is good. That's what I want also. Now let's see. I want to do a little bit, just a little bit more on the ship, and I want to bring a bright back to the ship, and the bright is where it opens up and people can come in. And if you don't want to be able to mess with this, you just lock your layer. So something like this, as a focal point, they're running towards that point, and then it will be illuminated, and you'll basically get the memo that this is where they are going. And again, stuff needs to make sense in a very simple fashion. Block stuff off maybe. That means stuff is in the way, and then you can get in. Yeah, not sure yet, but also we don't have to decide this right now. It's just something that now kind of make it work a little bit. Also, of course, in here we can continue to bring stuff that is maybe important to the scene. But yes, again, no need to obsess right now. We got what is crucial here. And now already we can see if stuff is slightly off. I think these are too low. Then you can just correct them in this way. And also, you can still move that thing around. Since we have this separate, you still have the power to move this around. I think a little bit to the left is good. So I like this situation here with the rock. You can see a little bit of that, and now basically I can go back and forth with the rock and then just make this work even better. I want to intrude this a little bit so that it doesn't feel like I am sparing this part on purpose, right? Which is always a good thing. I think then there's some blending going on. And yeah, this could be good. So what's next? Next is basically we need a color palette. Well, actually before that, there's more stuff that we could do on here. We could do already some kind of a blending, but that maybe it would make it already too complicated. So just showing you what I mean very quickly. So you could make some bright blending over here over the scene and give it that misty look that I was talking about earlier. We want to do that eventually. The question is, when do we do it, right? And the answer probably is not right now. But this will be, we'll see. There is a brush that I have for fog. I specifically designed this. Where is it? Yeah, it's this one. So yeah, that's just a glimpse into the future, how this could look in a second, right? Because I want to be able to judge this. Even as of now. So then I would mean it needs to be darker here, and where I don't want it I can cut it simply or partially delete it. But I think I want this ship to vanish into the clouds quite a bit, so this will be a thing for sure. It needs to be readable over here, but then I think it can completely dissolve the front. Yeah, I think so. Don't worry, I will bring stuff back in a second. All right. Also bring this back. Yeah, we want to see what it looks like. So you can see now, you can see it even more what I was talking about earlier, that this is the crucial stage. If this is appealing, then your result will be appealing. And it's not about details, because it's already becomes starting to be appealing even in this stage, right? So this is just a little thing that we can do. And also, since this is a separate layer, I do not need to get rid of this layer right now. I can just keep it and then later color it, and then maybe it's still any good and I can keep using it. But the thing that I like now is that you do not really comprehend the entire shape of the ship, which makes it mysterious. You just see bits of the ship, which makes it really interesting, and then other parts you do not see, they just vanish into the surroundings. So that's exactly what I was looking for. Now also we need brightness in the ground somewhere. We'll come to the color in a second, I promise you. But this is also still, if you know what to do, and I said this before, if you know what to do, do it. And the only thing you need for that, to be honest with yourself and say, okay, I'm not wasting time here. This is actually an addition that is useful. And once I see it, once I get the idea, I want to do it. Because these reflect, and then the bright sky reflects somewhere here, and that means that somewhere around here you will have this, where there is water, it will be very, very bright in the reflection, and then I think this will sell this part a lot. And of course be even more around here, and then be less towards the left and right. So maybe now you might say, oh yeah, you're slowly obsessing a little bit yourself. You could say that, yeah, that's fair, because I know that I have, remember, I have the full resolution. So what I'm doing now is not, I don't have to ever redo this if it's good, because if I zoom in, and we'll zoom in for the next part, you will have the crisp detail. It will all be sharp. You don't have to redo anything. That's it then. That's part of the final thing, right? So now for this, I'm filling this with a soft ground, which is always fun to do. And this will need to be really bright. Okay, we're on here. Towards the front. This is a little bit chaotic, but it is also in the thumbnail, the even smaller thumbnail, you will feel that it makes some sense, which is good. And then I'm coming back to here, and I'm making this much more of the same, because yeah, I'm not planning to have it be that wavy of a water surface. It just needs to be believable. And maybe make it even less chaotic here. So yeah, that's a lot better. Maybe this wet in here somewhere, but this is sloping, so this is not, it's not very likely that this will be. You can put this guy in the water or not. Yeah, maybe. This, the beautiful thing is we can paint now, right? It's not we're only, this is all one layer, and I want you to not freak out over this. This is, it's all right. It doesn't need to be all separate all the time. So what I'm feeling is that this foreground is too light, and as I said it before, once I have this feeling, this idea, that means I will do something about it. And do it in a more radical fashion too, because and you can immediately see that change was pretty good. So since it's still small, of course it's not really small, but in our mind it's still small, we can do more radical changes really quickly. So whatever I want to express fast, I can do it. I can go to these rocks and then just give them some rendering. That, and I can see immediately if it's any good or not, right? So next thing, color palette. Everything is shaping up to be okay, and yeah, if it's looking good small, then it will look like something when it's bigger also. So again, what do we have? Yeah, this is a matter, you could put this fog over the boosters or under, but because it's light, I kept them under, so they are really sticking out. That's really what I want. And if you see the small version, you can clearly see what's better. You want the light piercing through the mist, okay? And again, that's just the basic representation of this. There will be more. Okay, so we have the sky. We don't need an extra background. We have the ground. We have the ship. We have the fog, which is optional at this point. And yeah, that means we need colors now. So in terms of colors, what is very easy thing to do now, let's see quickly. This was the sketch, and now you can see what we wrote down here. We wrote that there needs to be some blue, some gray, and I wanted subdued colors. I want like I want blue grays, and then I want warm dark grays for the dark sand. I want this to be a dark sand, not a bright sand. Dark sand, dark rocks, a little bit of browns, ochre, vegetation, the grass here, not green but yellowish, dark, olive, something like this. So new layer, and we're doing a palette, and the palette, it will shock you, it will be extremely simple. And it will be not too big either, because I want this not to intrude so much into the image. You could say, yeah, why don't we use swatches? Be my guest to use swatches, but there's a big downside, because then you select the swatch, and then to tune the color every time you have to switch this, and it's really not a good idea. All right, so I want to build my own swatches, which you can very easily do by just putting some circles here. And of course I don't want to use red. That is of course a given. And maybe it's not a good idea to make them red in the beginning, because then you might be distracted, because the color changes perception if there's an extreme color next to it naturally. So let's not do this. Okay, so first thing, I want to search for my yellows. Vegetation, foreground yellows, yellow, ochre, maybe olive greens, maybe something like that, right? And it needs to be quite saturated. Put this down here. And then the next thing is, I would say, rocks, sand, which should be more warm, and also dark, but not as saturated. Maybe something like this, right? And in your head, this needs to start to make sense also. We need a gray that is pale and bluish, and of course we need blues. So a good trick to make an image, to make the color composition work, is if you pull this spectrum together. If you have something from everywhere here in the spectrum, that means that your colors will be all over the place. So it's always good to have to limit the palette, at least for the environment, because it's like outdoors, and the lighting and the shadow is basically making the whole scene, lighting the whole scene, which means everything that is matte or reflective will be roughly have similar colors, right? It's also natural, so the colors won't be extreme. There will not be a bright red automobile paint job or something like that. So for that reason, I would say I need a blue, but I want the blue to be, yeah, let's say, needs to be bright. Set this already. This is the sky blue, and this is just for this. For this, and maybe a little bit of reflections, and not too much more. And this is also just the starting palette. Once we color everything, once we have a tone and everything, we no longer need this layer. This is just pure color now, flat colors. And from this blue now we get the gray, because naturally the gray is playing in between these tones, right? It's not going to be a purple gray all of a sudden, right? It couldn't be. There's no reason for that. So the gray needs to be something like this, and maybe it's even a little bit more down in spectrum. Maybe like this, and maybe even less. Okay, so then we said, okay, we need a green maybe. And I see the green here. I see those two make up the environment, like make up this whole sky, the whole water, everything like that. And then yeah, maybe there's but the green can't be too different from the rest. And then of course a little bit of vegetation, no green can be also on here. I hinted at this already. Could be this. So these are really similar now. Yeah. Of course you could do one more, which would then be just saying one more to keep it simple. You can do 20, but it's not simple anymore if you do 20, so I strongly recommend you not do this. Keep it 4, 5, 6 maybe, and you should have an idea what they do, very specific idea. So for me, I just maybe will make a brighter that was not good. Maybe we'll make a brighter iteration of this brown, which, yeah, would have to be somewhere like this, but that is just maybe a reminder. I don't really need this at all. So because it's the same tone, right? It's not a different tone. It's pretty much the same tone. And now that I look at it, I want this actually to be even more yellow and also a little bit brighter. Yeah, more like this, I think. But again, this will be governed by everything else in the image, so it's not like this is super final or anything like that. All right. This is not, I think this needs to be, this doesn't work as well as I thought it would. And now there's the trick for you. If you want to see what this palette could look like if it's tuned, let's tune it. Right? You can tune everything towards a certain temperature. See how this changes perception a lot. This is now not what I want. This is, of course, if you dominate everything by one, everything gets more cyan or everything gets warmer. I don't want this to be warm, so this is out of the question. I maybe want this to be bluer, or no, not yellower, because the yellow is not supposed to dominate anything in terms of the scene. Also not greener, right? So yeah, but you can see there's interesting stuff that could happen here. So yeah, this is good to see what could happen. But if we don't want it, just delete the layer. Okay, so I think these are our tones for now. And now we have to see what happens. And for that, I need to inject those tones. So what I will do is I will inject these tones via overlay layers and direct tuning, and then talk to you in a minute when I'm done. So I have shown this method before, and it's basically utilizing the blending layer effects, in this case overlay, to just colorize every grayscale layer via clipping mask. This is an easy enough process, and you see me picking colors on the right side, and then either you can dump them in just with a paint bucket, or you can really paint them in and have brush strokes and area that you paint and areas that you leave empty, or fill them with another color. So this is handy to do for the very beginning, to get your color composition established basically. Later on this won't work so well, but I will explain this in a moment. So also intensity needs to be checked, and the further to the right you go in terms of saturation of color you pick, the more saturation you will mix into, or on top I should say, of the grayscale layers there. And the goal here is to, as I said, just establish the tones. You can't demand too much of this method, and you will realize that, for example, color picking is rather difficult, because you're not picking the real color that you're using, since it is a blending effect and not a solid layer. Alright guys, so as you can see, I did a lot of clipping mask overlay layers, which I basically use to colorize the grayscale image, same way I showed it in my lengthy tutorial video. You can watch that in all these 5 parts. Jokes aside, but this is a good method to do this. And once you're happy, and I want to make one thing clear right now, you will not be 100% happy the way this is right now, because it's tricky to color everything via these overlay layers. It is a good method to establish the tones in the scene, but it's not like you can do any colorization and you can do it in detail or anything like that. That's why I did it very roughly, and once I like it, I will now commit to it. And that means I will merge these layers, because when you cannot do any more with what is already there in terms of color tuning, that a big reason for that is because the grays cannot be overwritten by the colors in the overlay layer. So if you want a more brilliant color there or different tonality, you will have to change the grays also. But of course, hopping back and forth between the grayscale layer and the color layer is very tedious, and you might not, it doesn't make sense, because we're just going to paint this in a second, right? So therefore, all of this has to merge. Once we've done that, and you could see that in the sky I did a workaround because it would not give me a brilliant blue color, and the reason for that is because the gray was too bright, and it pushes the color towards here if the two add up, and you will never get something saturated like this. So for that reason, I needed to do a little workaround, and now we're back on a very simple layer structure. Also now we don't really need the sketch anymore, but now I want to show you something, because now we got back a lot of control. Now if you do a tonal control or a saturation control, you have the color plus the grayscale. Excuse me. So you can really influence the mids again. You can get more contrast without fucking up the color, anything like that. So in my case, I felt that I need a darkness in here, just a little bit. And then back to these rocks. See how also I want to highlight on the vegetation. I want to put more vegetation, but it doesn't let me if the base layer is a dark gray like it was. So there was nothing I could do there. So again, let's see. Now this becomes very, this becomes stale if you crank this. You make it too like that's also not good. So we're kind of limited what we can do here. We have to just resolve it through painting. That is also, excuse me, a rule that I want to leave you with is that if you can't make it better through tone control or anything, you will have to paint it. The problem then, it is not in the overall tonal distribution, it is that you need to make things less the same, right? Okay, so those guys, same. We can now slowly lock these layers, but the next thing that we'll do is we're going to paint over these. So now let's take a look at the beautiful painting that we got. So it's time. Now also these are distracting a little bit. We can see the tones and we can get them back if we want to. But now we can really delve into the scene. And the important part is that the thumbnail looks good tonally. And then you can see in there what is missing and what is lacking and what you need to bring up. So now the order of the layers is still a little problematic, and the reason for that is because I need to put the ship in between the ground and those rocks. See, where does the ground end? The ground ends here. So if you want a quick workaround, and this is now something that you would say, yeah, I just keep everything separate, I have full control. No. Listen, if you do that, you're getting dragged down. You're getting slowed down immensely by that. So what you want to do is be smart in what layers you combine, right? That is really the crucial point. You're not losing a lot of control. So look at this. This is the ground and the ship. The ground and the ship is only connected here. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to shock you. I'm just going to combine them. Why? Because now I can have a better layer structure. The ground, this is now the thing that overlaps, and this is the only thing I need to pay attention to. And you could even say, now we do something else. We make this even more logical, because the only thing that is in the foreground and should be attached to these rocks is whatever is here, right? So we can do this right now. This did not seem like such a good idea in the beginning, but it slowly is becoming a better and better idea. And this is to detach this from the rest of the ground, and then just have these two rocks and the ground be the entire foreground, and we don't need to worry about other things anymore. So, and this, do not cut this, you copy this. Where is it? Because that way, now see, I can move this all the way up here. Does not matter. And this now becomes one with those rocks. And just to illustrate that, if we had more extreme color down here, now see, just so you realize what's happening. This is in the foreground and this is in the background. You could say this is like just behind everything but the sky. And then this comes on top, and this now we can paint it together, because when painting I do not want to have a difference between these two. I want to paint fluently into these two, right? And of course you can always say, I'm making this, I'll do this via a new layer and a layer and another layer and another layer, but the logic is better. Now these two belong together in contrast, so if I want to change tonal control or contrast or saturation, I can change it for everything. It makes a lot more sense to have it together, since it's both in the foreground and like adheres to the same rules of contrast and saturation. So next thing we need to do is we need to start painting, right? We need to tune everything that we could not tune before, because this is now simple. We still have the fog separate, which I don't know if it's a good idea. Truth be told, I kind of want to combine the entire thing, right? But I know that I will be much faster if I keep the fog separate for now, because if I bring in the ship details here in the back and the fog is already part of the layer, it makes it harder to paint, right? So therefore I'm keeping this separate just for now. But I want to do real painting, so I don't want to make this out to be the whole point of this process is to be intuitive and fast, and not to be slowed down by 100 layers and complicated structure and a lot of blending effects and a lot of editorial editor work, right? That's not what this is about. This is more about painting. So let's do exactly that. So first, let's do a little bit on the ship and a little bit on the rocks, just as an example. So now I actually can zoom in, and now we'll use some brushes that are not your typical round brush, because now this is becoming like a real painting. And I want you to think of it like this, not just okay. We're painting the strokes ourselves. Let's see. So I'm taking stuff that is in there, and for starters I need a nice brush, and I'm going to not to take a very large brush to begin with, and I'm going to first of all make sure that the outline shape of these rocks is interesting. So where I think it's overdone, I tune it back, and where I think I need more detail, I will immediately put more detail. And not just detail, but also of course color that comes with that detail. And now I'm taking color again from the palette. I could also take it from here, but you might as well take it directly from the context of the image, right? And I'm making this everything a little bit better. And that's also something that I always talk about, how you should make stuff a little bit better and a little bit better at a time. And I think that you can make everything perfect. And this is the most I will ever zoom into this. I'm telling you right now. This is about the shape, and then sometimes now we leave some transparencies behind, which is fine, which is not as big as of a deal as it was a minute ago when we did the setup, right? Because the setup needs to be solid. Don't paint this transparent. You will be in hell. It will just not be fun. It will be a terrible experience. Now I can lock the layers, and I can get something good going. But if the foundation is transparent, that is not a fun time to have. So just be aware of that. And I'm just now painting and counter painting. In case you're not sure what I'm doing, that is what I'm doing. So this is no hocus pocus. This is just plain painting. It's just we need something going, and a lot of times we need a bigger brush for that. It is very oftentimes a good idea to just take a step back, take a bigger brush. I have this layer locked, so I cannot mess this shape up. If I want to mess with the shape, I just unlock it, and then I mess with the shape, and then I lock it again. And that is pretty much how it goes. So I'm looking now for the lighting of these. And when I find the lighting, I'm going to leave it alone. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing, right? And what is important is that now little bits of vegetation can come up. This is now all the same layer. We established this already. So that means I can do stuff. But of course, if I do the details here, that means if I paint over the ground, those details will be gone now. So I have to be careful about that just a tiny bit, right? All right, there were some hidden, some hidden blades or leaves. Do not obsess. A little bit here, a little bit there. That is the mantra now. And you could even zoom out this one one step, which would actually make sense so that you can see more stuff at once. So also the idea is that it will be maybe wet, the rock somewhere here. That could be the case, and it would look cool for sure. And see how this prevents me from really doing too much at once. So too much detail, that is. Okay, sometimes you feel like you should zoom in. Again, you go to like the previous zoom level. And the only reason is that where there is low contrast, it's sometimes just harder to see stuff. So, and then I will just quickly do something and then zoom out again. So this rock needs a structure and a texture, and for that I will have to do more of the small strokes. I don't want to put any texture. I want to imply the texture by just brush strokes, okay? All right, so there needs to be some dark vegetation here. This needs to be all vegetation, I figured. So in this case, still be a painter. Be a painter and be loose with these shapes. It will make much more sense. Like, you will not paint all the grass, or if that is even like a kind of a thick grass, longer blades. At least that's what I'm seeing right now. And if you're in doubt, you just create a new layer and try it out. And if you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you discard it. That's how it always goes, right? So, doing a little bit more of this. Hey, I forgot to include some stuff here. I hit this too early. And you will get happy accidents here, for sure. And the happy accidents, you want to keep them always. So this changed a lot. brings the vegetation really more to the foreground. I will keep painting vegetation on this layer now because this just makes sense. Next thing is that we need a highlight, I think, for the vegetation. So I can lock this and I can now see what happens if I do this. It will give me something, and that is, I think, working out pretty well. Play around with the saturation. Also, don't put everywhere the same thing, right? It needs to be lit somewhere, and then where it falls off over here, it does not need to be as light. Or maybe dark here and light here, but not light everywhere, right? So this can be tedious, but you see it's still a large brush, still rather large brush. And I want to make sure that I'm still not obsessing over this. But of course, with some details, there's no choice but to kind of do them right, because else you have to do them twice, which also is kind of sucks. So we need to do a little bit more in some instances here. I think this will remain dark, but I want it. And then we can let it fade, not like this. Let it fade in a way that we'll see if this is a good idea or not. So we could do this, but you can see, of course, that this is not making so much sense. And therefore, I think, yeah, we're still on this. I think we need to slowly just taper it down and then work against it to basically paint out this gradient, because of course in reality there would not be a gradient here. Doesn't make sense. All right, so selection is still on. I have to deselect and then keep doing the same thing. And yeah, I want those to be rim lit over here. And that, I think that makes sense. And then fall off towards this angle where it slopes down. Also, this is kind of a nice corner. This needs to make sense, look good. And then of course here it goes towards our guy. It's like an arrow, this, right? And don't be afraid to put down volumes, right? This is like painting. You slowly you put more detail, more and more detail. Again, look at this from a distance. It looks good, so we're doing the right thing, right? This is now became a vegetation layer that you can keep if you want to. That, as I said it before, sometimes can make sense to do it, to keep that for a while. If you wonder what brush I'm using, this is just a brush that reacts to pressure, and it has just a little bit of structure, but it's nothing crazy. So it breaks once in a while. it's just not very smooth, and it has an edge to it, and that's I guess that's all I'm asking of this brush to do. I don't want it to be perfect, because if I was, yeah, this would work with the round brush, but then you will have the problem that it looks too clean. That's just, I guess, about it. Now I'm doing iterations. You can't care too much where you are now working on, and we only have these 2 layers, right? And this will all get better. Bring up the details slowly. And sometimes there is hidden some detail in the shadow here. And then what you can do is you can bring that even through the shadow. And again, this is a very painterly thing to do, just to see how this renders, even with the very big brush. Put dark and then see what happens immediately. This is, I think, a lot of times what people do not dare to do. It's very healthy to do. Maybe I want this whole rock to be much darker. And as you do it, if I do it sloppily, you can see that detail develops naturally. And then, yeah, of course, anytime you can just make a new layer or work in between. Like, for example, we were to work on the ground now. I can work in between. That way I'm not going over this. I can just go here in between. I don't know where this is going, this slope. But I think is somewhat like this, and then this is lit. And this is lit differently. See here the blue mixes, and that's okay, because if the ground is wet here, that means that this could very well happen. And then you will just get uneven ground. And later, of course, we can break this further, but it should make sense in a rough state, like I always say. So now mic is in the way. So anyways, guys, I think you get the point. I will do more painting for you off camera, show you in the time lapse, and then we'll talk about it in a minute. See you. So yeah, you can do this basically as long as you want. I think this process that I'm doing here now takes me about 4 hours or something, so I sped it up substantially, so you could appreciate it without getting bored to death, basically. I like showing everything, but I am aware that it's not always a good idea to show it in a format like I did in the past, so that you will have to sit through like 7-8 hours. Now, this is a little bit extreme, so I think this is more pleasurable. So you saw me isolating there those rocks and then combining those rocks with the foreground because I figured I would have more control that way. And now I'm cleaning basically up behind the rocks and then rendering the rocks further. And as always, you see me starting out with a fairly medium brush size, so that way you get some texture if the brush can provide it, and also you're not going too thin or too detailed when you should not be doing that yet. And then as always, I'm jumping around. As soon as one thing has improved, I immediately jump to something else and improve that, because that's the other thing that I love to preach, is that you should develop the whole thing in its entirety, right? You don't render the ship perfectly or the rock perfectly if the other things are not up to par yet. So that is also a way that you can basically call it quits anytime you want, because if everything is consistent, which is not yet at this stage because the sky has not improved and the characters are not here, but at a certain point you will see that if the piece holds together, you can always decide that you're done and do something else, and it will be coherent, right? So there's a slight problem with perspective on the ship. Now that I bring more of the detail and more of the rendering, I actually realize that much more than before when it was rougher. Trying out certain things with those booster shapes, which I think I end up not using, but you never know until you try. So we are going back to the simpler shape, because also I realized that I want to blow out exposure on these boosters later, and I want to make them soft, and so this finicky shape, it really doesn't matter, but that's something that you need to judge from experience, basically. So of course you can make it much easier for yourself than I did here. I don't know why, but for some reason I always make it a little bit harder in these demos. So I'm having humans, I'm having nature, I'm having different materials, I'm also having artificial objects like the spaceship that needs designing. So basically you have to do all of that in one go, designing the characters, designing the spaceship. If, like me, you're doing it all original and you don't have the design already for any of these components, right? So don't get frustrated if this does not work out. This is a lot to ask for a couple of hours, and painting basically rather fast and designing everything on the fly. It can maneuver you into a spot that you are getting stuck, right? So there's more rendering now on the environment, and I figured there would be some, like, since it's very shallow water, you want some like irregularities on the surface there, some maybe small waves. And now once in a while you see me playing around with the brush tips and figuring out if there's like a texture brush that I could use. So finally we're going to render the sky better. Put this up for long enough, I think, and now this needs to really be good, because this needs to work together with the fog in the foreground, and they need to somehow blend and basically encapsulate this entire spaceship so that it's sitting in the mist in between the fog and the clouds. And that's what I think is the main attraction from an environmental storytelling perspective of this piece. Rendering the clouds better, which means that I'm making them sharper basically, and I achieve this by having a soft brush that I then erase against it, and then I'm getting still a diffuse shape, but it's getting sharper and sharper the more I erase around it with the soft brush. And now the last part that I put off for too long maybe is the characters. And now I'm just trying to see a design for them. I want them to have helmets and some gear. So this is like also a narrative point, because if you have to wear a helmet, that means there's some storytelling involved in that, because either there is no atmosphere because it's a foreign planet, or there's a dangerous situation where you need the protection. And of course you will go back to stuff that is familiar if you're designing on the fly like I do here. It's very hard to come up with something truly striking and appealing just for one piece. If it was easy, there would not be such a thing as a character designer that does nothing else but design characters all day basically. And this takes a fair amount of time, to be honest with you. In every piece where I put characters that need designing, I maybe spend, I would say, a good 40 minutes in this case to just design those characters. And that might not sound like a lot, but of course other stuff needs designing too, and then you might revisit it. And sometimes I spend like almost a quarter or a third of the entire time just on the character, because being human, everybody will look at them, and if they're off, then it's kind of everything falls apart. So there's the thing that I do sometimes, and that is the change in levels and tonal balance on something that I render in whole. And that is because I have the let's say you're, as a designer or as a painter, you're either underdoing or overdoing, and then you have to rebalance. And I am in the case of rendering the characters, I am underdoing it, so I don't have the optimal contrast. I'm always off by like 10% or something, and then I bring up the contrast once I painted the character in a more complete fashion, right? And then it gets easier because if you repeat the design on different poses like I do right now, you can work with the same tones, and if it's further away, you just cater towards atmospheric perspective. That means you lower contrast on those tones. You add more of passive light color, in this case gray blue, right? And then just like that, you make the tones work into the distance. And of course, this is a little bit of art in itself, to make small characters that are not super detailed but work. And it's a little bit of, dare I say, a cheerleader effect on those models, because if one or two work well, then the others will be more forgiving, and you will automatically correct in your head the poses and like for example the guy in the distance, like he's in a very loose running pose, but he works because the foreground works, right? So now we're getting to something interesting, which is a little bit of a texture brush on the ship, because again now I feel that since the sky is better and the characters are here, I have to render the ship now, and then all of a sudden sometimes I get an idea like this backlight that I just want to add something that makes the whole thing more vibrant and more interesting. And I think this design, it came together well in the back, and so I just add this stripe of light there, and also then you can give it an artificial color, which is I think nice for the scene, because it's a rather monotone scene, and it kind of gives this whole thing more life, I would say. I struggle with the rendering or I should say actually not the rendering, because the object wise and geometry wise this is pretty clear what's happening here, but there's little mistakes that add up, and then sometimes the in this case the hull design, it feels off, and then you have to correct it. And maybe it would have been a good choice to first work on the distortion in the boosters, like as I said, the diffusion of those boosters, because they overpower a lot of the detail that I'm painting around them, right? So this is still the same old brush that I use for a huge portion of the piece, and that is just a flat brush with a little bit of texture that reacts to pressure, and it has a hard shape, a hard outline brush. So from the grass to the details on the ship to the characters, everything I draw with this brush. This is my basic brush, or one of my basic brushes. You could consider this like the marker, like the round marker brush, but just with a different shape and a little bit of texture. So now more corrections on that hull, because the more you make intricate design decisions, the more mistakes will show and inconsistencies in the geometry will show up, right? And also sometimes you can make it a little bit more believable and interesting by adding detail in just one spot. So in this case, it helps to concentrate the detail on a few spots on the ship and leave others blank, and that's usually how you express I would say size in an object. Now this is a little bit crucial, but eventually will not be very critical, which is the perspective of those boosters was not there. I was just putting hard round shapes there, when in reality, of course, maybe you remember that I distorted the shape to get an angle, and of course the circles have to it has to apply to the circles as well, else they will just feel off angle slightly, and the more you render stuff, the more apparent this will get. Now I'm trying out different variations of the booster, maybe a light and a light, or some as if you could see inside the thing, but eventually I think I end up not doing it because it's too composed. I want something more going on, something more erratic, and that will be the blowout of those boosters that I will eventually render in, I think. And usually if I spend enough time on one portion, like 15-20 minutes, it's good, and that's like an inner clock then to keep up some speed and momentum, you want to move to something else then. Because if you have no idea at the moment, you might as well do something else, right? Of course, that is a very modern approach, because you could, as an artist, just leave the piece be for like a week and then come back, revisit, and you will have another idea. But a lot of times in this digital painting world, and especially when you're contracted, you don't have that luxury. So, and also for me personally, it's fun to keep painting. I want to get done with the piece, not because I dislike it, it's just because I like to see a result. It excites me more to finish work than to put it off for too long, right? So here we get additional structure to the ground, and the idea is that it's like a harder version of the sand ground, so there is deformity, and maybe the wind or the water will leave a certain structure on the ground, right? Or even footsteps, stuff like that. And then the rock needs rendering too. And from the very beginning, you could see that the rock on the left, the big rock on the left, that came very natural, and that I almost never changed this because it looks simple but really good. And that's again not me boasting about my skills, it's just that sometimes you are lucky and something comes out really good, and then you want to recognize that and leave it the hell alone. So, which is sometimes hard to do, because it needs a trained eye to recognize that, oh, I just did something good, I should not mess with it, right? But yeah, that is part of the game. So I'm now thinking about the ground and how this could be, how the slopes of the ground could be more interesting, so that you will feel the way it all makes sense in terms of geometry, even if you could say that about the ground, with the overlapping of shapes, right? And then of course, some rendering decisions, which now are getting more erratic, because I just see something in the environment, I feel the urge to change it, or add these little footsteps here to make it all of a sudden, occurs to you, oh, they were leaving something on the ground, so it needs to be accounted for. And up to this point, there was never a moment in this painting where I felt like I didn't know what to do, and that is a good thing. As long as you know what to do, you should always do it, and not overthink what is already there, right? If you have a mission, let's say you don't know what to do with the ship, you run out of ideas, but you know what to do with the character, with the rocks, with the reflection, do that first. Whatever it is that you know that you have to do is what you do when you are struggling with the rest. So now I'm going to put some digital watercolor you could say on these boosters. So what does it mean? It means I want them to leak out, to unite basically with the fog, to have an overexposed bleeding of the whites of that light that comes out of there, and that way make it interesting and give the whole fog more volume, right? And also make it more eerie and mysterious a little bit. Yeah, reflection on the water from the boosters is does not work very, it's not so eye-catching. That is because the water is already very bright, and that is also something that I think is essential to the scene, so I don't want to mess with that. But I think, and you can see this now, I feel that it needs a little bit more darkness in some areas so that the light can pop more where it needs to, right? So if you like, it's a very simple logic. If everything is bright, then nothing is bright, and if everything is dark, then yeah, it's just nothing is really dark. So you need that contrast. So we have a nice contrast in the foreground because the rocks are really dark and a part of the character are dark. But then in the middle, it's very samey. So it's very upper 30% tones that are happening for the rest of the image, for the entire background basically. So I'm pushing a little bit these clouds to be darker on the edge down there, to eat up the environment a little bit more, make that more believable. I like the left side where you can see through those rocks and you have a real atmospheric distance there expressed, so that's good. But it also needs to work with really wrapping up this ship. So a lot of these rocks had too little detail, or maybe looked still a little bit raw and artificial. So by bringing just 1-2 brush strokes to each of them, you can bring up the perception of detail tremendously, even though you're not adding a lot of detail. And I think that's something also, because the whole premise for this was it's a faster process. And of course fast is relative, but I think we can all agree that if you can do something really good that you're proud of inside of like 5 hours, 5-6 hours, basically anything below 8 hours, I would say, that you can do in a day, that's really good, right? Because a lot of artists take even way more time than this. And if you're, I myself, I said this in another video where I was talking about my very, very early artwork. I would take like 20, 25, 30 hours. You can spend, when you're learning, you can spend indefinite amounts of time. It never stops. So in this sense, I think this is not speed painting, which was a popular once some years and years ago, right? But then again, I think that it's the sweet spot is the middle ground, where you can spend, let's say, between 5 and 10 hours, get something really good, and that is really efficient. If you think about it, if that is going to make it into your portfolio, or you can charge money for that, or even just be happy with your art inside of 10 hours, it's pretty good. Bringing up the reflections a little bit now, going more towards pure white, because I thought to myself, usually you reserve the pure white for what needs the highest contrast, and in this case kind of has to be those boosters, even though also the character, like the visor and the character, I think is almost near pure white. So these two are crucial, because you look at the guy and then you look where the guy is going. This is always how it goes if you're entering the scene through a character, right? And in this case, I even make a small citation on the visor, because the visor has a little bit of that mint color that is in the backlight of the ship. Brought it in there just a little bit, and if you see it in full frame, you will see that also. I think, yeah, the video is the quality is good enough so that you can even make that out in the process now. But that's always a good thing, because color, it also tells a story. There's one dot of color, and then there's the same color in the destination, basically. So the visor and the ship, you make a connection through that color, possibly. So at this stage we could call it quits anytime. There's enough detail here for us to say, okay, we're done. The only thing that is special here, and that is what I'm putting up a little bit and is unusual for me, is that there's now quite a few layers which I'm keeping because that fog is in between, and I really want the fog to be able to switch it off and on to get access to the ship without it being in the way. So what changed now also is the boosters. I finally diffused them even more. I let them really bleed, and yeah, I think it looks, in this scene with the fog active, it looks much more logical. But you have to, in order to do those effects, sometimes you have to realize that you cannot have everything, meaning you cannot have great detail and at the same time be diffused and blow things out and let them melt into each other. You can, of course, that will work against your level of detail, right? Then you have to show the details somewhere else, like I'm doing on the back of the ship and in the entrance area, and have the boosters just diffused and the clouds diffused and the fog diffused. So a lot of the areas, maybe a third of the entire image later, will be very diffused, but that is a nice contrast sometimes. I'm still messing. Now this is looking pretty good. Still messing with the shape of the ship, not with the shape, I should say, the details in the hull, and that means that I'm, as you might have guessed, not 100% happy yet with those. So now we're smudging again. Smudge tool, very good to do this effect into the clouds. You have the soft brushes that you can paint clouds with, but then you also can smudge hard stuff to make it softer and to combine that basically. And I also do it, as you can see, to some parts of the hard shapes in the structure to just basically smudge it more together and make it more coherent, that it's really influenced by the fog. Now this little experiment, I want to bring some fog into the foreground, but then of course, since I now combined all the layers again, which you can see if you take a glimpse at my layer structure, is now dramatically reduced. So we're back to just a handful of layers at this point. And that is something I really like to do. If the layers become a burden, but you reach a certain maturity of the piece, I like to combine stuff again, and then it feels like it's baked in now. I don't question this anymore, because you cannot question everything at all times. It will make you go insane with digital painting especially, right? You have to accept that you're not perfect and that you will call this quits at a time where you could still work on it and still potentially improve it by a few percent. Yeah, and maybe you're also not ready and you need to more time, more development, and in the future you would have done that better, but that is always the case. So bringing up some more of the details, and at this point I'm really watching the clock and I'm really saying to myself, okay, this is as fine the brush tip as I will ever use. It's no more than this, and I will leave some rougher stuff that is not center of the image, like on the right bottom side. Not render this, just have people see the raw brush strokes. I think is really appealing, because we're not doing 3D rendering here. We are doing a painting, and a painting, it can have rough strokes that show, and it sometimes is more appealing than if everything is overworked. And they call it overworked for a reason, by the way, and I know this comes from traditional painting, but it still applies in digital art, I think, at least. So now I'm just looking out for stuff, because in my mind this is almost a wrap, and I'm looking for stuff that I don't like, stuff that is like, this bothers me, and it would bother me tomorrow when I look at the piece again, so I need to get this out the way. Basically, that is over the years has been my approach to wrapping up the images. What bothers you most now? What is there left that you really don't like that much? And I try then to fix it one last time. Also, yeah, sometimes all of a sudden you have the feeling that you can communicate more depth by adding like more characters, for example. So this is nice, and I immediately like this, and it works now because the image is pretty much almost done, and you can see that it gives this additional depth just by adding these tiny characters that you would not even recognize them as characters if it was not for the context of the scene. So again, we have some layers and now this is like really the last post-processing, adding some glow, making this stuff really a little bit more movie-esque and a little bit still more alive, and now doing really stuff that is very hard to do analog, that you basically only can pull off like this in digital painting. More pushing of the tones. This is overlay. Atmospheric blending is what I call this, where you blend darker atmosphere and lighter atmosphere just to get a final balancing of the entire image. And this was something here that was really like the last strokes here that I revisit this because it really it did not like the rock in this state, so I had to revisit it one last time, and then I think it's a wrap. Alright guys, so we have arrived at the end, putting the stylus away. So let's first of all, hope you enjoyed this process, and of course this process can be as long as you want it to be, but the premise, I think we showed that in the beginning, is that you're getting started fairly easy and you're getting into the flow fairly easy, because there is something that manifests immediately and you can judge that and have, like, from very early start you have the impression that you have a complete image. You're not just working on one part and one part is very good and the other is not so good. So we're trying to look into the future in the beginning of the process. So yeah, let's take a better look at this. Alright, this is the image where I arrived at. So I spent a little bit more time than initially planned, and of course now you might ask yourself, when do I stop, right? It's the old question, same old, and the answer to that is that you need to restrict yourself in terms of detail. So once you reach a certain detail, and I determine this by brush stroke width, right? So if I have the feeling that my brush stroke is getting ever smaller, you have to stop yourself at one point. So let's quickly have a look here at the layers, and you saw that I amassed layers a little bit. Then throughout the process I recombined those layers. So maybe right, all these layers here on top are right now just post-processing layers, exception of this and this. So all of that stuff is just like additional blending and effects and stuff like that you can do in the very end, right? But as you can see, I have this layer combined a lot, and then I combine all of these backgrounds. So pretty much yeah, that's all one layer, right? So I will introduce new layers to try stuff. For example, I painted over this just a little bit, and then once I did that, you might as well merge that. Same for this. There's small details here and there emerging. Once I am happy with that, I will combine the layers. Now there's some stuff that you cannot easily combine. For example, you have an overlay layer that I use to blend on the characters. Now if this was not a clipping mask, it would bleed out, right? And then if you were to combine this, it would be catastrophe, because now you combine this and this turns into normal layer, and then it's just the normal pixels. So this doesn't work. So what you do in this case is you keep this a clipping mask, and if it is a clipping mask, then now you of course can merge those layers and you will get the same result that you saw. There's maybe some questions for this. I used, I can say this in advance, I used a lot of smudge tool and a lot of soft brushes, more than I usually use, and the reason for that is because all of that mistiness, fogginess needs to be expressed, and it's much easier for me to paint it with a hard brush and to go from hard structures and then later soften them. The other way around is a nightmare. You don't want to do that. You don't want to paint softly and then like paint over edges to make harden them out or make them appear more solid. This is not. I don't know anyone who does this. In my opinion, you should always go the other way around. And then you have to restrain yourself, right? When is it time to stop doing that? You need hard edges to show, right? And then sometimes you just smudge them out and combine them, like in a traditional like painting where the colors run into each other and create this effect of combining elements, right? Like here. It gives a little dramatic effect, and also I use overlay and color dodge layers to create the last bit of the dramatic lighting, right? So you have the lighting is working fairly well. Let's see, where do I have it? And then see, this is just an overlay layer that gives a little bit more color in some areas. I use this to vignette a little bit and to introduce some new colors over here and over there. Not new colors, I should say saturation, basically, right? Because you cannot really colorize very intricately with the overlay, but you can push the saturation up. And then this color dodge to just create some post-process illumination, right? You can utilize much more than this. You can utilize hard light, dark, burns, all of that stuff. Every artist has their favorites. For me, it's overlay to colorize, to push saturation, and to create shadows sometimes, and then it's a little bit of color dodge for the more artificial looking lighting. And that's just preference. It's also a matter of style. And then this stuff comes, in my case now, to be fast. This comes on top of everything, and after that there's, yeah, you could now combine all of this and paint on top. You can always paint on top, of course, but you can then no longer like paint in between layers, because every time you're picking up color, you're picking up colors that include the overlay and the blending layers, and then you're never getting what you see, basically. So that should come last. So anyways, guys, hope you like this process, and yeah, let me know your experiences. So guys, thanks a lot for joining me in creating this piece. I hope you, first of all, I hope it's entertaining. Second of all, I hope that you took something for yourself that you can employ for yourself. But let me know in the comments down below, as always. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Also, I plan on doing a lot more digital analog art, and it's always, you know, similar topics. Of course, I like to do fictional, I like to do original art. That means I might have some ref, but I always come up with something new. And of course, yeah, what is new, right? Designing the next spaceship, designing the next few characters. You could argue that none of this is really new, but at the same time, it is, if you create it yourself and you design it yourself, it might not be as perfect always as something that is pre-existent that you lift from, let's say, the Star Wars universe or something like that, but it is your own. And also, a lot of people in the industry, if you create portfolios, that's what people want to see, right? Nobody cares if you can recite something perfectly. What people care about is, can you come up with something, right? So, in this sense, thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll do it again soon. Leave your comments down below. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Enjoy, and see you next time.